Perfect. And once again, we are off with a new episode. And welcome to the podcast Corner of Special Education. My name is Karsten Skruder Gundersen, and I wish you are most warmly welcome to my Corner of Special Education. Welcome to the third episode of a total 6 this month, which is the Autism Awareness Month. In this episode, which is English version of the topic S2C, Spell to Communicate, you will hear my conversation with Elizabeth Vosseler from I-ASC. For my Scandinavian listeners, there is also an episode in Norwegian. The topic of these two episodes combine the main theme of season 3 and 4, I-ASC and autism. I was first made aware of S2C from the Stavekoden, which is the Norwegian side of this method, and Hilde and Vilde made me aware of the guest of this episode, Elizabeth Vosseler. So I contacted Elizabeth to learn more about this method, what it is, and how to use it, among other things. And this is the conversation you will hear in this episode. With that, here's my conversation with Elizabeth Vosseler. And I would like to welcome to the podcast Corner of Special Education and a new episode in the series Let's Talk About. And this episode is recorded on the 18th of February, and I myself am sitting in Oslo, and it's 6:13 p.m. to be exact. And my guest, who will shortly be giving an introduction of herself, is sitting in the US, if I'm not entirely, that's correct. So there is a time difference that is always a bit tricky to schedule, but we manage, so I'm very grateful for that. The reason I wanted to make an episode of the topic of today's episode is that the podcast is now in its 4th season, and the main topic is autism. And the main topic of season 3 was I-ASC. And today's topic is combining actually those two topics into one episode. And as for those who are regular listeners to this podcast, you know that I have a main theme for the episode, and I also publish extra and bonus episodes that are not maybe are related to that theme, but anyhow, I-ASC. Is that correct, Elizabeth?
Yes, we call it I-ASC.
I-ASC, yeah, perfect. There you go. And with that, this episode guests have also, why don't you give a short introduction of yourself, Elizabeth? And welcome, first of all, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show, Kirsten. My name is Elizabeth Vosseler, and I live in the United States. Specifically, I live in Northern Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C. And I have been a speech-language pathologist for nearly 30 years, and I am the executive director and founder of I-ASC, which is the International Association for Spelling as Communication. And I'm also the founder of Spelling to Communicate, which we call S2C for short. And that is a method of I-ASC that teaches non-speaking individuals the motor skills to be able to purposely and accurately point to letters to spell out whatever they want to communicate.
Perfect, thank you. And the reason why I contacted you was that I first contacted and also will record an episode in Norwegian with your Norwegian colleagues, and they have their company is called in Norwegian Stavekoden, so they gave me a tip of your name, and I was immediately intrigued to make an episode also in English about this topic. And for myself, I haven't heard about this method. So you asked me before we started the recording when and why I created this podcast. And some of the reason is it's first of all, I get to talk to and learn from different persons that have they work with the topics that I myself maybe aren't that familiar with, as in this instance here. Now, what is I-ASC?
So I-ASC is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to increase access to communication globally for non-speaking people, and I can talk about that in a sec, but to increase access to communication around the world. And we do that through four main pillars: training, education, advocacy, and research. So for our training branch, we train people to become practitioners in spelling to communicate, like your two Norwegian colleagues, Hilda and Vilda, who are doing amazing work in Norway. We currently have S2C practitioners in 42 of the United States, 42 out of 50, and in over 24 countries around the world. And we're very happy that Norway is one of them. Our education branch, we provide tons of free resources on our website. We do monthly free community webinars that any of your listeners are welcome to attend for free. We do events like our upcoming online music festival on February 22nd, so this Saturday, where we'll have one at 1 p.m. Eastern, and I think you were 6 hours ahead, so it would be 7 p.m. for you, where non-speaking people have written their own songs, had them put to music, and then they direct their own music videos. It's pretty amazing. So you're welcome to attend, and I'm happy to share information. But we do events like that, presenting at conferences. That's our education branch. Our advocacy branch is conducted by non-speakers themselves in conjunction with speaking allies, and they run campaigns. They try to educate people about the abilities of non-speaking people. And currently, their two campaigns are around equitable access and participation in their own medical care. So they're really trying to educate physicians and other medical practitioners about non-speaking people. And then also on equity in spelling, to make sure that people from all countries, ethnic backgrounds, race, gender are represented in non-speakers. So that's our advocacy branch. And then finally, our research branch, I-ASC partners with researchers around the world to better understand non-speaking people. I meet a lot of researchers who tell me that they're researching autism, and when I ask them how many non-speaking people they have, they tend to tell me none. And so that really skews the data, and it skews what we really know and understand about non-speaking people.
Perfect, thank you.
And we have a lot of videos on our website, which is I-ASC.org, O-R-G. So there's a lot of videos on our website that explain spelling to communicate. I think one thing that's important to explain before we go too deep into this is about what is a non-speaker. Because many people use the term nonverbal. to describe someone who doesn't talk. Uh, the overall non-speaking community does not care for the term nonverbal because nonverbal means literally from Latin without words. And just because you're speaking doesn't mean you're without words. So when I'm talking and you're listening, Karsten, you understand what I'm saying. That's your comprehension, your receptive language, and you're having thoughts and ideas about what I'm saying. That's your expressive language. To share those thoughts and ideas requires communication, and all communication requires some type of motor or movement to nod your head, to point, to use body language like shrugging your shoulders, to type, text, handwrite, speak, sing, sign, right? All of that requires motor. So non-speaking refers to those who do not have the motor planning skills to reliably and effectively use speech as a means of communication. So, like I said, for a long time they've been called nonverbal, but that means without words. That means without thoughts and ideas. And what we found is non-speaking people have many thoughts and ideas. Their issue is they can't share it, right? And the difference between somebody who has been diagnosed as autistic who speaks, who generally is thought to be age appropriate or better intelligence and comprehension, and those that don't speak is not necessarily a deficit in intelligence. It's a deficit in the ability to use speech or the fine motors of the fingers to write, type, text, sign, etc. That's the difference. So some people that are non-speaking, it's a continuum, do not speak at all. They have no words. Some are what we call minimal speakers. They have a couple words to a couple hundred words or phrases that they've used over and over and over again. All done, go home, mom's car, hamburger, french fries, whatever that might be. And then there are unreliable speakers that talk all the time, but really are not communicative with that talk. So that's what we call non-speaking, and that might be a different terminology than a lot of your listeners are used to hearing.
Interesting. Now, you were talking, you mentioned the science, and I was wondering, could you give me and the listeners a little bit more about the background and the science behind I-ASC and this method?
Sure. So I-ASC is just an organization that supports non-speaking communication. The methodology is called S2C, or spelling to communicate. And the science behind it is that when we're listening, I'm producing speech sounds, right? By moving parts in my vocal tract, right? It includes my lips, my tongue, my soft palate, my pharynx, my vocal cords. And I'm generating sound which is acoustic and measurable, which is now why all of our various devices can interpret and read our speech. So I'm producing these sounds that go out in the air, they go through, they hit your ear, go through your auditory system, and they land in this area called Wernicke's area in your brain. And that's the area for language comprehension. Connected to Wernicke's is a bundle of fibers that connects you to Broca's area. Our area for expressive language are thoughts and ideas. And so that together is our language, and that's oral language. The written language version of that is reading for comprehension and spelling for expression, right? So I could send you all this information in email, and if you read it, you would understand it through your reading comprehension, and you could respond back to me, but you spell your ideas, and then you use motor to express them, because all forms of communication require motor. But historically, that's not how we teach communication. Even as a speech language pathologist who was trained to teach speech and language, I really wasn't teaching the motor component. I was approaching, for those who were non-speaking, from a more cognitive, let me teach you the word for cup and for pen and for book and for whatever, right? And if you didn't say it or you couldn't show it to me with your body, I assumed you didn't know it. However, our non-speaking population all has a commonality in that they have a breakdown in their motor and sensory systems. And motor and sensory are together in your brain. There are these two strips in your brain that are like twins, and they're right next to each other in the brain. And because sensory is like the navigator to the motor, right? When you drive, you have to look where you're going. Your sensory system is always giving feedback to your motor system. And one thing we don't agree upon much in the autism world, but we do agree that sensory is off in autistic individuals, right? So here we have this sensory system that's off. It's either too much or too little. So it's not a good navigator. Then we have the motor system, and the motor system is mapped out to various parts of the body. But about 75% of that map on the motor strip is to operate the fingers, which we call the digits, or the articulators, the moving parts for speech. And that's about 75% of the motor strip. Your trunk, your arms, your legs, they get about 25% on this motor strip because there's much more precision involved in moving your fingers and your articulators, which are also used for eating, right? A primary function of life. There's much more precision and speed than there are in moving your arms or legs or trunk, right? So we need more power to that. There's a little space. We have the sensory strip, the motor strip, and right in next to it is this little space in the brain called the supplementary motor cortex. And it's responsible for voluntary or purposeful motor. And most communication is purposeful, right? If I step on your foot, you might yell out something reflexively, maybe something you don't want to say in front of your mother, right? If I say something like, have a good nice day, you might say, you too. That's automatic. But the rest of our communication is very purposeful. If I say, what's your classroom like, Karsten? You're going to think about it and you're going to purposely plan what you're saying. And so most communication is purposeful. So that area is controlled by the supplementary motor cortex. And we all have this process called praxis, Praxis, which goes from having an idea to a plan to executing that plan to adapting the plan if it goes wrong. So if I think to myself, I really want to sip of my coffee right now. That's my idea. My plan, reach out my arm and grab my coffee cup, which by the way is a multi-step command, right? Because my elbow is now resting on the arm of my chair. So the first thing I have to do is lift my elbow off. Then I need to rotate my arm. That's step 2. Step 3 is to reach forward. Step 5 would be to open my hand to grab the cup. In the way I'm sitting, step 6, I need to lean forward. Step 7, close my hand around the coffee cup. Step 8, lift the coffee cup. Step 9, bring it back to my face. I have to actually turn my coffee mug around or coffee cup to the opening, lift it, drink it. I'm at least at 10 motor steps, and this is right in front of me. But if I had reached out, and because I'm looking at you, Karsten, I missed my coffee cup. My hand, the sensory would tell me, nope, you didn't hit it. I could adjust really quickly that motor by looking at the cup and going right to it. Or if I'm still maintaining eye contact with you, I could kind of feel around until I could grab it and bring it back. So that's that refinement, that adaptation. What we have found, and I can quote you the research here in a sec, is that in non-speaking people, the plan is perfect. The idea is perfect, sorry. The plan is perfect, but there is a breakdown between the plan and executing the plan, and then a further breakdown in that sensory adaptation because we know sensory is off in autistic people. That breakdown between plan and execution is called apraxia or dyspraxia. They're really the same word. People use them in different professions differently, but it's really the same thing. And so it means this praxis system is off. Research starting in about 2015, 2018 really started showing that in 2/3 of autistic people have apraxia. 2/3. And that 1/3, it's significant enough, the apraxia is significant enough that it affects their ability to speak or to communicate using the digits or the articulators. So the part of the 2/3 that's they might just come across as a little clumsy, a little awkward, maybe using their body just a little bit differently. In the 1/3 that are non-speaking, you can really see that motor difference. You can take any non-speaker and put them in a hallway next to a same age peer and have them walk down the hallway, and a total stranger who's not in special ed will say, that one moves differently, right? I can see I can see my folks from 1,000 feet away in an airport or on a beach or in a park, the way they're moving, and I can hear them from 2,000 feet away. You just know that profile when you see it. And so that's the population that we work with. But really, people have been looking at this motor difference in autism since the late 80s, early 90s, starting with two big pioneers in the field, Anne Donnellan, who just recently passed away about a year or 2 years ago, and Martha Leary. And they started writing about it then. And I would say in the mid 2015, that time range, it's really gotten to the attention of a lot more researchers who are looking at the motor component of autism. So now many more articles are coming out, and including a very interesting study that was done between Johns Hopkins and the University of Pittsburgh, where they were looking at infant siblings of kids who were already diagnosed autistic, because we know there's a higher incident in a second child, and they were looking for markers in the infant siblings, and they found that one of the first purposeful motor actions that infants take is when laying on the belly, they purposely turn their head one side or another to track, sensory information. If mommy's calling from one side, they turn their head. Yeah. That as early as 3 months old, they were seeing a lag in head turn in the kids who would later become diagnosed as autistic. Yeah, so every day there's a growing body of research in the motor fields and various. Actually, what's interesting is they're coming from many, many different kind of researchers, but all supporting this motor component. Now, again, 1/3 of autistic people have no motor issue. Another third have this awkwardy motor, but still can communicate. And 1/3 have where the motor has affected them and they're in that non-speaking continuum that I just described. So we've also had some research, two research studies that have been published that show the capacity of non-speakers to communicate. So those have been done specifically around non-speakers who spell and type. And one was wearing very high-tech $30,000 eyeglasses that don't have glass in them. They have one camera that looks out to the stimulus and one camera looking into the eyeball. And they were seeing that in non-speakers who spell, that as they were touching one letter, their eye was already going to the next letter. We do that when we talk, right? As we're finishing one sound, the tongue is already moving to get to the next sound. So that was really interesting. And in another study, they looked at the literacy skills in non-speakers who had not had formal education in spelling or reading. But all of our non-speakers, when they become open-ended and fluent, will tell us, I have been reading and spelling since I was 3 and 4 and 5 years old. because I couldn't interact with the world the way my peers did. And print is everywhere. And I'm really, really good at pattern recognition. And so they learn the patterning of spelling and reading on their own, whereas most of us learn spelling and reading through direct instruction, right? So again, different brains, different interactions with the world from birth onward really develop your skills in different ways. Um, yeah, so we know that language, our comprehension and our expression, and speech, as well as all other communication, are in two different parts of the brain. We know that language is 100% cognitive, and that speech, sorry, is 100% motor, as is all other forms of communication. So for me as a career speech pathologist, I realized that for 19 years of my career, I'd been approaching this wrong, right? I had been teaching the names of things and trying to get people to repeat after me. People with a motor issue can't repeat very well on demand. They can't follow our model. They can't do imitation. And that when I was trying to test them to see, do they understand this word, they had to complete a motor task to show me their comprehension, right? So the first folks that I started developing this methodology on were kids that I had been seeing for years and years and years. And when I switched to coaching their motor, much like a sports coach teaches motor or a piano teacher teaches motor or any instrument teacher, right? Um, if I were to teach you baseball, right, which is a very American sport, I would say, here's a ball, here's a bat. Karsten, I'm going to throw the ball to you. You hit it with a bat. And you're like, got it. If you swing and you miss, from our special ed lens, we would say, oh, Karsten's not very smart. He doesn't get it. And what would we do? Teach ball, teach bat a billion times. But the only way you get to show me that you understand it is by hitting the ball, but I never teach you to hit the ball. I started teaching kids how to hit the ball, right? How to get to the rate, by even lift your arm, move your shoulder, about showing them, teaching them how to move their arm to spell on an increasingly complex set of letter boards. And I can show you that in a minute. I'm going to text somebody to bring me my boards. So that's what we did, is I shifted to teaching the motor. And that made all the difference. And these were kids that I had worked with for 8 to 10 years doing traditional speech, picture cards, all of this stuff. And within a year, they were getting to open-ended communication. They were starting to be able to tell me thoughts and ideas. In fact, one guy that I worked with, and again, we'd been working together since we were 8, and I had been teaching him he, she, ing verbs, hitting, jumping, sitting, right? And in, on, under prepositions. His first sentence that he ever spelled out for me, and this took months, right, of practice, was, if I would have known, I would have done it myself. I nearly fell out of my chair because I was like, what? That is such a grammatically complex sentence. He's using a reflexive pronoun, right? And as he became open-ended, he was able to spell more paragraphs, thoughts and feelings, sophisticated vocabulary, all of these things. And at one point, I'm in tears. And I just said to him, I'm so, so sorry. All these years, I underestimated you. I was teaching you things you clearly already knew. And I said, was it terrible? And he spelled out on the board, I knew you loved me. You always treated me with respect. You did the best you knew how to do. And that, for me, was a life-changing moment. I mean, it was already life-changing of switching to the motor and seeing the progress that I couldn't make doing traditional approaches. But for me, it also inspired me that I need to try to bring this around the world, try to make sure that there's not the case where non-speaking people are sitting there understanding and having potential that they can't reach because they can't communicate.
And during the work with the previous season, season 3, where, as I said, the main topic was I-ASC, some of the things that were mentioned most often was, as you know, said that every person should be given the ability and possibility to express themselves, and it is for us that are around that person, it is our task to provide them with that possibility. So I would say that this method is, would you say that is primarily for persons with autism or also other diagnoses?
So right now, I would say about 70% of our caseload around the world who spell to communicate are autistic. 30% have other motor sensory diagnoses. The commonality is the motor sensory. So we have people, the 30% is generally people with syndromes or genetic conditions that affect their motor sensory system, but that includes Down syndrome, Angelman's, Phelan-McDermott, Pitt-Hopkins, tubular sclerosis complex. And for some of the kids who have syndromes, kids and adults, the progress is going to be slower because their motor profile and their overall profile is more complex. But with time and practice, they make progress. And our autistic population, again, it depends. There's just every individual is so different, but they generally progress a little bit faster than those with genetic complexes. But we're teaching that motor. So instead of teaching from a cognitive perspective or a behavioral perspective, or even the social perspective, we're teaching that motor of lift your arm, move your eyes. And we, like any motor task, you start easy, you get hard, right? So if you're going to learn to ski, you start on the bunny slopes, really easy, basic ski maneuvers, and then you work your way up until you can ski on black diamond. So we start with the alphabet split into thirds on these stencils, right? So, and we have Norwegian stencils that Hilda and Vilde could show you. But so here's 8 to 9 letters on a board, and we can even cover a row if we need to with a flap of paper. So you only have to scan left to right, right to left, and up to down. We give kids in special ed a lot of practice scanning left to right, almost no practice scanning right to left or up and down. So the motor to the eyes is even more complex than the motor to the mouth or the fingers. So we start with it split up, A to I, J to R in English, and S2C. And that we actually give kind of a fake finger by putting a pencil in the hand. And so we teach the individuals how to, with the movement starting at the shoulders, poke in and out of the letter. And that poking in and out, it slows everything down. It's very tactile. There's sensory to the non-speaker. There's sensory to the practitioner or the communication partner receiving it. Because you see a difference between a very purposeful poke in and out or like a mispoke and a correction. And so we both get that sensory, and it slows down this brain to body so that they become synchronized. We're also providing the sensory feedback that the body's not. So if I'm doing a lesson on your podcast, Karsten, and I would say I was on a podcast and I would teach podcast, PODCAST, and I'd write it down for my speller and I'd say, I met with Karsten Gunderson, and I'd spell out your name, and he is a special educator and a podcaster. And I'd say, and he lives in Oslo, Oslow, Norway, Norway. I'd spell it out. Then I move those things away. And so if I would say, what country does Karsten live in? Well, there's only one right answer, and we have to get the N. But if my speller pokes the J instead, I would say, oh, you're too high, come down, right? I'm giving that sensory feedback, just like when I missed my cup because I wasn't looking at it, I had to get the sensory feedback. So I'm serving as a motor coach as well as the sensory system to teach this motor. And we keep practicing and practicing and practicing it, just like skiing, just like piano, just like driving a car, until you're good at it. And then we go to the alphabet altogether. Right? I folded it these handles. I'm showing it so it's facing you. So now we have the 26 alphabet. I forget how many letters are in the Norwegian alphabet. There's more than 26. So now obviously this is a lot more motor planning, more ocular motor to scan, up, down, left, right, left, all over. We've gone from 2 rows to 5 rows, from 8 to 9 letters to a field of 26. So our accuracy has gotten there. Now I can start opening it up, right? When I initially ask questions, I have to know exactly the answer because I know exactly the target, because what we're doing is target practice. Now I can open up and say, oh, I said Karsten lives in Norway. Tell me another country in Europe. Tell me another Scandinavian country. Tell me what continent, Norway's on. So I can start opening that up. And then after we're very good, lots and lots of practice, we move to a laminate board. And the laminate board is simply a piece of paper with a heavy laminate on it to keep it a little stiff. It's got the whole alphabet plus backspace plus punctuation plus done. And on the backside, we have numbers. We have a number stencil too. So we can also do math. We can talk about science. We can talk about all the things. And from the laminate board, we go to the exact same thing I use for my own computer, a Bluetooth keyboard. And we now pair the Bluetooth keyboard to some sort of monitor or screen, like an iPad or like a computer screen. And now that becomes the sensory feedback system, right? So it's very much based in science. It's very much based in what we do, right? At the heart of education, at the heart of every single type of therapy is this, right? Teach a thing, practice a thing, generalize over the thing, right? And we use, just like I would spell out your name in Norway and Oslo for my speller, just like a teacher spells out those things and writes it on the board, right? I was a university professor for 12 years. And when I would write stuff on the board, my students would say, Professor Vosseler, is this going to be on the test? And I'm like, well, I'm not writing it for my health, am I? And so it's a giant sign that says pay attention. So I'm using all the tools we use as educators, as therapists. But the difference is I'm presuming competence in my non-speakers, that they can and want to learn, that it's my job to teach them the content, right? I don't presume knowledge. I don't presume they just know everything about Norway and Oslo and whatever I'm teaching. So I have to teach the knowledge, but I presume they can and want to learn. And I do presume that their comprehension is intact, because there's no reason to think that just because they can't talk doesn't mean they can't listen and understand and have thoughts and ideas. And I think that's where we've broken down. So I'm teaching the motor, and that's been the real paradigm shift. And for me, it started with my own long-term clients who I had seen for 8, 10, 12 years. And that all the ways when I was focusing on cognition, I wasn't making progress because they still couldn't show me. I had to teach the showing how. So that's the big shift.
Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth. I must say that this was truly interesting for me to, to have a little bit more information, and that you have shown how to use this material and method. And I think we could have continued to talking at least 1 hour more, but we have to be closing in on the landing and the closure of this conversation. And yeah, so I'm just wondering, from all of the content of this conversation, what do you want the listener to take home from this conversation?
I would really love your listeners to rethink what they know about non-speakers, and just rethinking that non-speaking people may know a lot more than we've ever given them credit for. And even if they never are communicating with them, to assume that those students are, or their own children, are entirely capable of learning and have been listening their whole lives.
Perfect, thank you. And the final question: you have already mentioned a lot of resources, including your own websites, yeah. But do you have a tip of the day for the listener?
I think my tip of the day is to resume competence, and not only in non-speakers, but just in everyone, right? I think our world could use more presuming competence these days, that that folks are, by human nature, motivated to learn and want to learn. So that we should just presume competence, that everybody wants that. And it's just our job to make sure that we can get the message across in every interaction that we have, regardless of whether someone has a disability or not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, with that, Elizabeth, I would once again thank you for taking the time to join the Corner of Special Education, and wish you all the best.
Thank you. And I hope you'll enjoy your conversation more with Hilda and Vilda. I'm very impressed with the great work they're doing in Norway, and I look forward to there being more Norwegian non-speakers who are now able to communicate.
That concludes this extra episode. But before our ways part, remember to follow the podcast on Spotify or where you listen to podcasts. Also, remember to follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Also, if you want the latest news and posts from the blog, you can sign up to the newsletter from spesblog.no. If you have any comments or want to get in touch, don't hesitate to send me a PM or email at question@spesblog.no. As always, I really appreciate if you rate, share and recommend the podcast. Finally, thank you to all of you who have listened to this episode, and a warm welcome to new listeners and followers. And a special thanks to Elizabeth for taking the time to join me for this episode. I hope to meet you again in the next episode of Corner of Special Education. Until then, take care.